The morning was calm and soft. Light filtered through the thin curtains, giving the small room a gentle glow. The air smelled faintly of fresh dew, and the quiet hum of the neighborhood could be heard in the distance. It was another ordinary day, and the person moved through the familiar rhythm of getting ready for the day, feeling the comfort of routine and the slight excitement that comes with the unknown beyond the door. Stepping outside, the air felt cool and fresh, brushing against the skin and filling the lungs with a sense of clarity. The street was quiet, except for the occasional sound of birds singing and the soft rustle of leaves as a gentle breeze passed through. The mailbox stood at the edge of the small garden, and reaching for it, the hand brushed against the smooth metal. The sound of the latch clicking open was familiar and brought a small sense of satisfaction. The eyes scanned the letters and flyers as they were sorted, carefully placing the important ones aside and discarding the rest. The garden stretched slightly to the side, with small flowers blooming in colors that were subtle yet beautiful. The scent of the earth, after a night of dew, was calming, and there was something peaceful in the stillness of these few moments before the day truly began. Then a movement caught the attention. A figure appeared at the edge of the property. Someone knew someone from the house next door, stepping out for the first time since moving in. The figure paused, noticing the person at the mailbox, and a smile appeared, bright and unexpected. A simple gesture that carried warmth and a silent invitation to speak. The person paused, feeling a flutter of curiosity at this simple act of friendliness. It was strange how a smile could have such an effect, how it could stir something quiet in the heart. And Minda simple question followed something ordinary. Perhaps about the weather, the flowers, or even the small dog that often wandered near the fence. It was enough to break the ice and create a bridge between two people who had never spoken before. The words were simple, and the voice carried a gentle tone that invited conversation without forcing it. The person found themselves responding naturally, the words flowing easily, as if they had known this neighbor for much longer than just a few minutes. The conversation was light at first, casual remarks exchanged, but underneath there was a spark of connection, a thread that began weaving between two lives. Neighbor laughed softly at a small joke or an observation, and the sound was comforting, like a familiar melody that one had forgotten existed. The eyes met and held for a moment, a silent acknowledgement that there was something worth noticing in each other. Something about the ease of the interaction was unusual in a world that often felt rushed and distracted. The person realized they were smiling without realizing it, a genuine smile that mirrored the neighbor's warmth. As the conversation continued, small details emerged. The neighbor spoke about moving into the area, how the house had felt empty for a while, how there was hope in making it a place of life and laughter. The person listened with care, noticing the subtle way the words revealed vulnerability and trust. It was a quiet kind of openness that did not demand anything but simply shared a piece of the heart and mind. It was easy to respond in kind, sharing small bits of life, the routines, the little joys and frustrations. That made the day unique and personal. The moments stretched with a gentle rhythm. Time seemed to slow, as if allowing the conversation to linger longer than it would have in a usual encounter. Each smile, each glance, each slight gesture became a part of a growing understanding, a recognition that even in simple words there could be meaning and connection. There was no rush, no urgency, just the beauty of two people noticing each other and the world around them in a shared space. Eventually, the conversation had to pause, a wave of reality returning, the person remembering errands to run or chores to finish. Yet there was a sense of anticipation, a quiet hope that the next encounter would come soon, perhaps in a similar brief moment, yet carrying its own importance. The neighbor waved lightly, a gesture that seemed to say more than words could capture, and the person returned the gesture, feeling a strange lightness in the chest, warmth that lingered long after the figure had moved inside. The rest of the morning passed, but the mind often drifted back to that smile and the simple question that had started it all. The routine felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a small seed had been planted, ready to grow in its own time. The flowers in the garden seemed more vibrant, the air fresher, and even the small noises of the neighborhood carried a new charm. There was curiosity about the neighbor, about the life they might lead, about the stories hidden behind those gentle eyes throughout. The day small reminders appeared. A note slipped under the door, a glimpse through the window. Friendly wave from afar, each carrying the memory of the first encounter and the growing sense of connection. Quiet promise that ordinary days could hold extraordinary meaning in ways that were unexpected and gentle. The evening, as the sun began to lower, the sky painted in soft hues of orange and pink, the person found themselves walking slowly along the path that led past the neighbor's house, pausing to notice the lights coming on, the faint sounds of life from within the home. It was comforting to see someone settling into their space, feeling a part of the neighborhood even in small ways. There was a sense of community even in the silence of shared existence. The awareness of another human being nearby whose presence was quietly reassuring that night as the lights in the room flickered on. The evening settled in to calm the mind. Replayed the events of the day, the simple question, the smile, the warmth of genuine attention. It was remarkable how small acts of kindness and curiosity could leave a lasting impression. How a moment of noticing another person could create a memory that lingered and inspired reflection. The heart felt lighter, the spirit more open to the possibilities of connection and friendship. Lying in bed, the person thought about tomorrow and the promise it might hold, perhaps a conversation that could grow longer each time, or perhaps simply the comfort of knowing that a neighbor existed who had shared a smile and warmth that felt authentic and rare. The world seemed a little softer, the distance between people a little shorter, as if a thread had been quietly tied between two lives ready to be explored in its own time and rhythm. Sleep came slowly but peacefully, carried by thoughts of unexpected friendliness and gentle curiosity. The first part of the day's story had unfolded quietly but meaningfully, planting the seed of connection in a heart that was ready to notice and be noticed. There was hope in the ordinary and beauty in the simplicity of a smile, a question, and the awareness that another human being cared even in small ways. The morning arrived quietly, with soft light spilling over the street and the familiar hum of life beginning to stir in the neighborhood. The person stepped outside, feeling the freshness of the air brushing lightly against the skin. The garden glistened with dew, and the flowers bent gently under the weight of the night droplets. The mailbox stood waiting at the edge of the path, and the hands moved, automatically gathering the small pile of letters and flyers, placing each in order as the mind wandered to the thought of the neighbor from the previous date. It was strange how quickly a simple encounter could take root in thought. How a small smile and a casual question could replay endlessly in the mind like a melody that refused to fade. The person found themselves walking slowly past the neighbor's house, pausing at the edge of the garden to see if there might be a glimpse of activity. Perhaps there would be a wave or another simple greeting, and there it was, the neighbor stepping outside, tending to the small patch of flowers at the edge of the yard, bending slightly to touch the soil with care. The sun caught on the hair, and the light seemed to make the smile even brighter. The morning conversation began without much plan or thought, words flowing naturally about the weather, about the small details of the street, the quiet routines that made the neighborhood feel alive in a gentle way. There was laughter at small observations and an easy silence between sentences that made the moments feel comfortable and real. The person noticed details they had not seen before. The neighbor's hands were careful in the way they touched the plants, at a gentle tilt of the head when listening fully, and the way the eyes lit up with curiosity and interest. As days passed, these encounters became a quiet rhythm, series of small interactions that wove into the fabric of ordinary life. There were greetings over the fence when taking out the trash, small discussions about plants or the direction of the sun on the windows, and casual comments about errands that had to be run. Each interaction was small yet meaningful, a gentle reminder that human connection could exist in the simplest of exchanges. The person began looking forward to these moments, counting the steps until the path led past the neighbor's house. One afternoon, the neighbor appeared with a small basket in hand filled with freshly picked fruit from a nearby market. It was offered with a shy smile and a quiet comment about the sweetness of the season. The person accepted gratefully, feeling warmth not only from the gesture, but from the thoughtfulness behind it. The fruits were shared and discussed, their colors, their textures, and the stories of how they were grown. The conversation meandered naturally from one topic to another, the flow easy and unforced, as if the air itself had allowed a space for trust and familiarity to grow. There were moments of silence, 2 moments where the eyes met and no words were needed to acknowledge the presence and the quiet joy of simple companionship. The person noticed how comforting it was to be understood without explanation, how reassuring it felt to have someone nearby. Listened fully and responded with sincerity. Each interaction left a lingering sense of connection, as if the day had been gently brightened by the small acts of attention and the shared understanding of ordinary life in the evenings. The walks along the street took on a new significance. Noticing the neighbor at the window, the soft glow of lights from within the house, and the occasional wave that spoke volumes about care and acknowledgement, the person often paused to watch the way the neighbor moved through the small tasks of life with care and attention, noticing the small habits that revealed personality and warmth. The quiet observation was not intrusive, but appreciative, a way to understand and connect without demanding anything in return. Routine of small visits continued with each day, adding layers to the relationship each conversation revealed. Something new, a story of the neighborhood from long ago, a memory of childhood. Games played on the street, or a quiet reflection about the change of seasons. The person listened with interest, feeling the depth beneath the casual words, noticing how much could be conveyed in a sentence or even a glance. There was a growing sense of familiarity, a bond forming in the shared moments of ordinary life. One morning, a small accident occurred. The neighbor tripped slightly on the edge of the path, and the person rushed to offer help, steadying the figure and making sure all was well. The hands touched briefly, and there was a quiet laugh of relief, shared moment that deepened the awareness of each other's presence and care. The neighbor expressed gratitude in a way that was sincere and heartfelt, not just in words, but in the tone and manner of speaking. The person felt a flutter of something warm and human, a recognition of mutual concern and kindness that went beyond casual acquaintance evenings. Became a time to recall the day, to think about the shared smiles and conversations, to remember the way the neighbor's eyes had lit up with curiosity or amusement. The person often found small items in mind to mention the next time they met. Question about a flower, a comment about the weather, a gentle joke, or observation that could start a new conversation. The anticipation of seeing the neighbor became a comforting thought, a small thread of joy running quietly through the day. There were days when the encounters were brief, just a passing wave or a quick exchange of words, but even these moments carried meaning, the awareness of being seen, acknowledged, and valued. Even in passing, the person felt a quiet sense of connection, a small happiness that lingered in the chest long after the encounter ended. The neighbor's presence became a comforting certainty, a gentle reminder that life could hold small pleasures and genuine human connection. The person also began noticing the subtle ways in which their own behavior had changed. The steps seemed lighter at the smiles, more frequent the heart, more open to the possibilities of kindness in the world. The neighbor's consistent warmth had created a sense of safety and reassurance that made ordinary days feel richer and more meaningful. The simple pleasure of conversation and shared observation became a highlight, a part of life to cherish and anticipate. Over time, the bond deepened in quiet, unspoken ways through gestures, small and thoughtful, a shared laugh at a passing event, a word of encouragement when the day felt heavy, a simple compliment on a small effort made to brighten the day. There was no rush, no urgency, only the gradual unfolding of trust and familiarity. As each day added layers to the growing connection between two lives, evenings passed with a soft glow as the sun set in shadows. Stretched across the street, the person often lingered near the window or walked slowly along the familiar path, reflecting on the moments shared, noticing the small changes in the neighbor's expression or posture that revealed subtle emotions and thoughts. There was a sense of continuity in these observations, a growing awareness of the neighbor as more than just someone nearby, but a presence that carried warmth and understanding sometimes. The conversation shifted to dreams and hopes quietly and naturally, without the need for explanation. The neighbors spoke about small aspirations, things they enjoyed, and the little joys that made life meaningful. The person listened intently, feeling a growing admiration and curiosity, a desire to understand more and share in the experiences of someone whose presence had become significant in the quiet unfolding of each day. By the end of the week, The rhythm of interactions had created a comforting pattern, a gentle anticipation. For the next encounter, and a quiet satisfaction in the shared moments, each smile, each word, each gesture had contributed to an unfolding story of connection and mutual appreciation. The person realized that what had begun with a simple question and a smile had grown into a small but meaningful friendship, one that carried the promise of deeper understanding and human warmth. As the sun set and the sky turned soft shades of color, the person paused to reflect on the beauty of ordinary life and the unexpected joy found in simple moments. The neighbor's presence was a gentle light in the day, a reminder of how small acts of attention and care could create bonds that were real and sustaining. The evening air felt softer, warmer, and the thought of tomorrow brought a quiet sense of hope, anticipation, and curiosity for the next shared moment of conversation. Laughter. In connection, the morning came soft and quiet, with the sun rising slowly over the rooftops and the air carrying a gentle chill that promised a clear day. The person stepped outside, feeling the cool breeze brushing lightly against the skin. The neighborhood was stirring slowly, with distant sounds of people moving about their routines and birds singing in the early light. The garden at the edge of the path glistened faintly from the morning dew, and the small flowers swayed gently as if greeting the day. The person walked along the familiar route past the neighbor's house, pausing at the fence, noticing the figure tending to the small patch of greenery, bending with care to pull weeds or water the plants. The neighbor looked up and smiled warmly, a greeting that carried familiarity and comfort. The person returned the smile and asked a simple question about a plant or the weather, and the conversation began naturally as it had so many times before. Yet today, there was a subtle difference, a slight softness in the eyes, a quiet pause in the voice that suggested something deeper, waiting to be shared. As they spoke, the neighbor seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if choosing words carefully, then spoke about something personal, a memory from a time long past, a small struggle, or a quiet worry that had lingered in the heart. The person listened intently, feeling the weight of the words and the courage it must have taken to speak them. The vulnerability was unexpected, yet moving, and it created a new depth in the connection that had been growing over the days. The conversation meandered gently through the morning, with periods of silence that were comfortable and unforced. The neighbor's voice sometimes faltered slightly, yet carried sincerity and trust. Each gesture, each glance revealed more about the person behind the familiar smile. The person realized how much courage it took to share even small personal details with someone not so long known, yet already trusted in a way that felt natural and reassuring. As the morning passed, small acts of care followed the confession. The person offered help in simple ways, picking up a tool or holding a small basket of plants. The neighbor accepted with gratitude, a gentle nod or a quiet word of thanks that spoke louder than any elaborate gesture could. The hands brushed briefly in the exchange, and a warmth spread through the chest, recognition of shared humanity and mutual care that did not need to be spoken aloud. The day continued with light conversation about trivial things about the street, the changing colors of the sky, and the small animals moving through the gardens. Yet underneath the words, there was a quiet understanding, a sense of having crossed into a space of trust and openness. The neighbors spoke about hopes for the future, dreams that had been kept, private fears that had been carried quietly, and the person responded with encouragement, gentle questions, and attentive listening, allowing the conversation to flow naturally. At one point, the neighbor paused, looking down at the soil, and then up with eyes that carried emotion. The person noticed the small quiver of the hands and the subtle shift in posture, a silent admission of vulnerability. The words that followed were soft, simple, heartfelt, and unguarded, revealing a loneliness felt in the past, and the desire for connection that had been delayed for reasons known only to the neighbor. The person felt a strong urge to offer comfort, to share reassurance that they were present and listening fully, without judgment or interruption. Interaction stretched into the afternoon, with moments of quiet reflection and shared laughter over small trivialities. The neighbor seemed more relaxed now, more willing to speak openly, and the person felt honored to be a part of this unfolding trust. A simple gesture, a hand resting lightly on a shoulder, a basket placed carefully on the ground, became a symbol of care and mutual understanding that needed no explanation. The day felt fuller, richer, more meaningful, as each interaction carried the weight of honesty and the lightness of shared smiles. Later, the conversation shifted naturally too. Memories of childhood games, stories of streets and houses long forgotten. Yet still vivid in the mind, the neighbor spoke with gentle nostalgia. The words tinged with a quiet melancholy, and the person listened fully, feeling the texture of life behind. Each sentence, the stories were simple, yet profound, revealing a life lived with care and sensitivity, and a quiet longing for understanding and companionship. As the evening approached, the sky turned soft shades of color, painting the neighborhood in gentle hues. The person lingered near the fence, noticing how the neighbor moved slowly through small tasks, a dish being washed, a window being opened to let in fresh air. Each motion was graceful in its own way, reflecting the rhythm of ordinary life and the effort to create comfort and peace within the home. The person felt a deep respect for the neighbor, for the openness and trust that had been shared in the hours of quiet conversation. Walk back along the path was slow, thoughtful, each step measured in reflection on the moments shared. The heart felt lightened by the intimacy of honest words, by the acknowledgement of shared human experience. By the time the person reached the familiar threshold of the own home, there was a sense of quiet fulfillment, a recognition that something meaningful had begun to grow in the space between the two houses that night. The mind replayed the day, the soft words, the brief gestures, the laughter, and the quiet pauses. The person thought about the courage it took to share personal fears and hopes, and felt a swelling of empathy, admiration, and connection. The neighbor's voice lingered softly in memory. The warmth of presence felt vividly in the quiet of the room. The ordinary world of the neighborhood felt infused with new significance, the familiar street a canvas for human interaction. In gentle, trusting bed, the person reflected on how much could change with a single moment of honesty. How a small confession could shift the rhythm of daily life, how it could deepen understanding and spark the beginnings of emotional intimacy. There was curiosity for the next day, for the chance to hear more, for the quiet hope that trust and connection could grow in small increments that made ordinary life extraordinary. Sleep came gently, carried by thoughts of shared moments, by laughter and words, and by the silent acknowledgement of vulnerability and trust. The heart felt open to the possibilities that could unfold in the coming days with the neighbor. His presence had become both comforting and intriguing. The simple rhythm of life in the neighborhood had taken on new depth, meaning, and warmth. As the person drifted into a calm, reflective rest, anticipating the next encounter, morning arrived again, soft and filled with potential. The person moved through the small routines of life with attention, noticing small details that had gone unnoticed before. The neighbor's window glimmered with light, the faint sound of movement within the house, a reminder that another person's life intersected gently with their own. The thought of seeing the neighbor again brought a quiet excitement, an awareness that human connection, even in small doses, could bring profound satisfaction. The day unfolded slowly, with brief interactions, brief words, a passing smile, small acts of care and kindness, each reinforcing the bond that had begun in the early morning conversation. The neighbor seemed more relaxed, more willing to speak openly, and the person noticed subtle shifts in tone, gestures, expressions, all revealing layers of personality and humanity that made each encounter richer, more engaging, more meaningful. By evening, the shared experiences of the day had created a quiet rhythm, a gentle anticipation for tomorrow, a deepening understanding that trust had grown, a recognition of shared humanity, and a feeling that the ordinary world could hold extraordinary significance through the simple acts of listening, kindness, and attention. The morning light came slowly, spilling across the rooftops and warming the quiet street. The person stepped outside, feeling the cool breeze brush against the skin, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the trees brought a sense of calm. The neighborhood had begun to awaken softly with distant footsteps and the faint hum of activity in houses nearby. The small garden at the edge of the path glimmered faintly with dew, and the flowers swayed gently as if greeting the day. Walking past the neighbor's house, the person noticed familiar movements, tending to the plants, adjusting the small tools, and pausing to observe the flowers with careful attention. There was a quiet smile, exchanged a nod of recognition, and a simple question. Asked about the day ahead or the plans for the morning, the conversation began easily as it often did, but there was a subtle difference in tone, a warmth that carried meaning beyond casual words. The neighbor seemed more open, more willing to speak freely, and the person felt a gentle anticipation for what might be shared. Morning continued with small tasks and gentle exchanges. The neighbor spoke about recent events in the neighborhood, observations about changes in the trees or the colors of flowers. The person responded with interest, adding small comments, questions, and reflections that deepened the sense of shared attention and care. Each word, each gesture, carried weight in a way that was subtle but meaningful, and the connection that had been growing over days seemed to expand with quiet confidence. During a pause in conversation, the neighbor suddenly spoke about a personal feeling, a longing for something more in life, a sense of hope mingled with hesitation. The words were soft and careful, yet full of honesty. The person listened with full attention, noticing the slight tremble in the voice, the careful choice of words, and the openness that came with trust. There was a desire to offer comfort, reassurance, and understanding, a quiet recognition that sharing this part of oneself required courage and vulnerability. The discussion moved naturally through memories, past experiences, small disappointments, and quiet joys. The neighbor spoke about things that had been kept private for years, small regrets, hopes for the future, and a desire for companionship that had been postponed. The person felt a deepening empathy, a strong sense of connection, and a willingness to share in the understanding of life as it was revealed in gentle words and reflective silence. Time passed almost unnoticed as the conversation deepened. The neighbors spoke about the importance of small acts of kindness, about noticing the details in life that often went unseen. The person nodded in agreement, sharing similar reflections, observations from their own day-to-day experiences. The exchange was rich in meaning, yet gentle in delivery, a quiet intimacy growing through honesty, attention, and shared humanity. Each glance, each smile, each movement became part of the unfolding bond. At one point, the neighbor paused, looking down at the hands, then up with eyes that carried emotion. There was a moment of hesitation, followed by a soft confession. A simple statement of feelings held for a long time, a recognition of the quiet joy and warmth felt in the presence of the person. The words were unhurried, careful, and heartfelt, the voice carrying both hope and fear. The person felt a rush of emotion, a warmth in the chest, and a desire to respond with honesty and sincerity. The response was gentle, careful, and sincere, expressing admiration, appreciation, and a quiet acknowledgement of shared feelings. The neighbor smiled softly, the expression tender and full of relief. There was no need for elaborate words. The sincerity of presence, the gentle tone of voice, and the unspoken understanding carried the meaning fully. A moment of quiet connection passed as the two stood together, feeling the shared emotions and the beginnings of something deeper. The day continued with light conversation, laughter, shared observations, and gentle encouragements. Small gestures reinforced the growing connection. A basket of flowers moved carefully, a cup of tea offered with warmth, a hand lightly resting to show support. Each action was simple yet profound, carrying the weight of attention and care that spoke louder than words. The neighbors seemed more relaxed, more willing to show true feelings, and the person noticed the subtle changes with admiration and a sense of wonder at the depth that ordinary life could hold. As the afternoon sun began to lower, the sky glowed in soft colors, painting the street with gentle warmth. The person lingered near the fence, observing the neighbor finishing small tasks in the yard, noticing movements, expressions, gestures that spoke of calm, confidence, care, and attentiveness. The quiet companionship was comfortable and satisfying, shared understanding of presence and attention that made ordinary life extraordinary. In subtle ways, the neighbor began to speak about future plans, small dreams of gardening, of exploring new paths, of reading and learning, and perhaps sharing experiences together. The person listened with interest, encouragement, and curiosity, offering thoughts, reflections, and gentle ideas in response. The conversation moved naturally, through hopes, aspirations, and the quiet desire to spend more time together in shared moments. The bond felt stronger, deeper, more meaningful than ever before. Evening approached with a soft glow in the sky and the air carrying the faint scent of flowers and freshly turned soil. The person walked slowly along the familiar path, reflecting on the day, on the confessions shared, the small acts of care, the gentle smiles, the laughter, and the quiet moments of understanding. There was a deep sense of fulfillment, a recognition that the connection had grown beyond simple friendship into something heartfelt, meaningful, and sustaining. The neighbor appeared at the gate with a small gesture of kindness, a shared smile, a brief wave, or a simple offering of tea or fruit. Each interaction carried significance, a silent acknowledgement of care, attention, and understanding. The person felt a quiet excitement, anticipation for the next encounter, a gentle hope that the relationship would continue to grow naturally and sincerely through ordinary life, shared moments, and honest presence. Later in the evening, the mind wandered over the day, replaying conversations, gestures, moments of laughter, moments of quiet reflection, and moments of shared vulnerability. The heart felt full, the spirit light, the awareness of trust and honesty between the two strengthened. A sense of peace and belonging that was rare and precious. The ordinary neighborhood had become a place of human connection, warmth, and possibility, a space where shared presence could blossom into something deeper. Lying in bed, the person reflected on the courage it took to speak openly, to share feelings, to acknowledge hopes and fears, and how these acts had created a sense of intimacy and trust. The neighbor's presence lingered in the mind, comforting and exciting awareness of shared humanity and the beginnings of emotional closeness. There was curiosity, hope, and quiet joy at the thought of future days filled with conversation, laughter, shared experiences, and continued care. Sleep came gently, carried by the reflection of heartfelt words, the warmth of trust, the sincerity of gestures, and the quiet understanding that connection had grown in meaningful ways. The heart felt open, receptive, and alive to the possibilities that tomorrow might bring with the neighbor, whose presence had become important, cherished, and deeply appreciated. Next morning, the light returned soft and welcoming, and the person moved through familiar routines with awareness. Noticing small details, the neighbor might appreciate small gestures that could bring a smile or a moment of warmth each step along. The familiar path carried anticipation, gentle excitement, and a quiet satisfaction in the growing bond that had begun with simple smiles, questions, and honest conversation. The day unfolded naturally, with moments of shared observation, laughter, thoughtful gestures, and quiet support. The neighbor's presence was consistently warm, sincere, and engaging, each interaction reinforcing the sense of care, attention, and mutual understanding. The ordinary world seemed full of potential meaning and warmth as the bond deepened in small, incremental steps, bringing comfort, curiosity, and quiet joy. By evening, there was a sense of completeness, fulfillment, and anticipation. A recognition that trust had grown, feelings were acknowledged, and the ordinary neighborhood had been transformed into a space of warmth, understanding, and emotional closeness. The day ended with gentle reflection, hope, and readiness for the moments yet to come with the neighbor, whose presence had become significant, cherished, and meaningful. Morning arrived, calm and soft light filled the quiet street. The person stepped outside, feeling the air brush gently against the skin and the faint scent of flowers drifting from the garden. The neighborhood was waking slowly with distant sounds of life, the occasional footsteps, the soft hum of doors opening, and the gentle rustle of leaves. The familiar path stretched ahead, and the person felt a quiet anticipation for the moments to come. Walking past the neighbor's house, there was a wave, a smile, and a gentle greeting exchanged across the small fence. The neighbor was tending to the garden, adjusting a small pot of flowers with careful attention. The sun caught the light on the figure, casting a warm glow on the familiar gestures and movements. A simple question was asked about the day ahead, and the conversation began naturally, flowing with ease, comfort, and the quiet warmth that had been building over the days. The morning passed with small exchanges, shared observations, and thoughtful words. The neighbor spoke about plans for the day, memories from long ago, reflections on small joys and challenges. The person responded with interest, encouragement, and gentle laughter at light-hearted stories, each word, each glance. Each smile carried meaning, creating a rhythm of companionship and connection that felt both natural and extraordinary in its subtlety. The bond that had begun with small gestures and casual conversation now carried a depth of trust, attention, and at one point, the neighbor paused, looking up with eyes that held a quiet intensity. The hands rested lightly on the edge of the garden, and there was a soft sigh, a moment of hesitation, followed by careful words expressing feelings that had grown. Over time, the person listened, fully noting the tone, the rhythm, the sincerity behind each word. A confession emerged, not forced, but gentle, heartfelt, acknowledging the warmth, the joy, the comfort, and the quiet affection that had been felt in each shared moment. The person responded with honesty, speaking openly about the feelings that had also been growing day by day, acknowledging the subtle excitement, the curiosity, the joy, and the comfort that the neighbor's presence had brought into life. The voice was calm, sincere, and steady, carrying with it the warmth of trust and the affirmation of connection. The neighbor's expression softened. A smile appeared, a quiet laugh echoed, the simple sound carrying a depth of meaning that words could barely capture. The day continued with gentle conversation, shared laughter, and the occasional comfortable silence. The two moved through the small tasks of life together. A basket of flowers exchanged a thoughtful gesture of tea or fresh fruit. A gentle touch to steady a movement. Each action carried intention, attention, and care, demonstrating the bond that had grown naturally through shared moments. Observation and quiet presence. The ordinary neighborhood had transformed into a place of emotional closeness, trust, and quiet joys. The afternoon sun lowered, and the light painted soft colors across the rooftops. The person lingered near the fence, observing the neighbor finishing small chores in the yard. Each motion reflected care, patience, and attentiveness. The conversation shifted to future moments, shared dreams of exploring small adventures. Learning together and continuing to find joy in ordinary life, the exchange was calm, thoughtful, heartfelt, and filled with a quiet excitement about the possibilities ahead. The bond deepened in the moments of vulnerability. The shared reflections on past experiences, the careful expressions of hope and appreciation, and the simple acknowledgement of trust, each smile, each gesture. Each word strengthened the understanding of mutual care and emotional presence. The person felt a deep sense of gratitude, admiration, and warmth, knowing that the neighbor's feelings mirrored their own, and that the connection was real, sincere. And growing evening approached. The sky turned gentle shades of orange, pink, and soft purple, painting the street with quiet beauty. The person walked slowly, reflecting on the unfolding connection. The confession shared the moments of laughter, the moments of silence, the simple gestures that had carried meaning. The heart felt light, yet full, the spirit calm and joyful, the awareness of shared understanding and affection strong and comforting. The neighbor appeared at the small gate with a gentle wave, a smile, and a gesture of kindness, such as offering freshly picked flowers or a warm, cup of tea. The simple act carried profound meaning, reinforcing the bond of trust, care, and shared humanity. Each interaction was filled with attentiveness and warmth, a reminder of the extraordinary significance of ordinary moments spent together. As the sun finally dipped below the rooftops, the evening air was soft, fragrant, and still. The two lingered together outside, speaking quietly about the day, the little joys found in small acts of life, and the anticipation of more shared moments in the future. The conversation meandered naturally, laughter and gentle smiles punctuating reflections on memories, dreams, and feelings. Each moment reinforced the trust, understanding, and affection that had grown steadily over the days. The person walked home slowly, reflecting on the depth and beauty of the connection. The neighbor's presence lingered in the mind, a comforting warmth that carried into each thought and action. The ordinary world had become infused with extraordinary significance. The familiar street transformed into a space of human connection and quiet joy. The heart was open to the possibilities of tomorrow to more shared smiles, laughter, and heartfelt conversation. That night, the person lay awake thinking about the journey of the past days. The moments of vulnerability shared, the confessions spoken, the gestures of care and kindness, and the laughter that had filled the quiet streets. There was a quiet excitement, hope, and gratitude for the neighbor. His presence had become meaningful, cherished, and deeply appreciated. The ordinary had been transformed into something profound by simple acts of attention, openness, and shared humanity. Sleep came gently, carried by the warmth of trust, the sincerity of confessions, the quiet joy of companionship, and the anticipation of future days. The heart was calm, yet alive. The spirit open, receptive to the unfolding story that had begun with a simple question and a smile. The bond felt strong, genuine, and ready to continue growing with honesty, care, and shared moments. Morning returned with soft light, and the person moved through familiar routines, noticing small details. The neighbor might appreciate small gestures that could bring comfort, warmth, or joy. Each step along the path carried anticipation, gentle excitement, and a quiet confidence in the strength of the connection that had grown steadily over the days. The ordinary neighborhood was alive with potential meaning and warmth. The day passed, filled with shared observation, laughter, gentle gestures, and quiet support. Each interaction reinforced the sense of care, attention, and mutual understanding. The bond had grown beyond casual friendship into a space of trust, affection, and emotional closeness. The ordinary had become extraordinary through small, consistent acts of kindness, honesty, and attention to one another. Evening fell again with a soft glow across the rooftops, and a quiet peace settling over the neighborhood. The person reflected on the unfolding connection, the warmth of shared presence, the heartfelt confessions, and the sincerity of gestures and words. There was gratitude, hope, and a gentle excitement for the future moments shared with the neighbor, whose presence had become deeply meaningful, cherished, and heartwarming. As night approached, the quiet streets held the memory of laughter, conversation, gestures of care and attention, and shared moments of vulnerability. The heart felt full, the spirit light, and there was a gentle sense of completion, fulfillment, and hope. The ordinary had transformed into a space of warmth, understanding, emotional closeness, and human connection through the simple acts of noticing, being present, and sharing honestly with one another. The person fell asleep with thoughts of the neighbor lingering gently in the mind, a comforting presence, a reminder of how connection could grow from a smile, a question, and honest attention. The story that had begun with small gestures now reached a heartwarming conclusion, a promise of continued friendship, affection, and shared moments filled with joy, trust, and quiet love.